Severance, Dawn of the Blade, a prequel to his Kiss, The Guillotine Part I, The Architecture of Emptiness, the Ministry of Humility's headquarters, occupied 7 city blocks in the heart of New Penitence, a brutalist monument to enforced mediocrity. Its walls were the color of overcast skies, its windows narrow and severe, designed to let in light without beauty. Inside, 3,000 bureaucrats maintained the machinery that kept society safely numb. Cale had worked there for 18 months. At 24, he was the youngest senior compliance officer in the ministry's history, a distinction that should have filled him with satisfaction, but instead sat in his chest like a stone. His office on the 15th floor overlooked Sector 4, where identical housing blocks stretched toward the horizon in perfect, soul-crushing symmetry. Sometimes he stood at that window for hours, watching the gray people move through their gray lives, and felt like he was looking at a photograph of hell. Officer Thrace. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling him from the window. Director Salvo wants to see you. Cale adjusted his uniform black, severe, with the ministry's silver eye embroidered over his heart, and made his way to the director's office. The hallways were silent, except for the whisper of air filtration and the soft beep of biometric scanners. No one spoke in the corridors. Speech implied desire to communicate, and desire was always suspect. Director Salvo sat behind a desk of polished steel, her face carved into an expression of perpetual disapproval. She was 63, had served the ministry for 40 years, and wore her devotion like armor. The compliance chip behind her ear had been upgraded so many times that her emotional range existed somewhere between contentment and mild concern. Officer Thrace. She gestured to the chair across from her. Your performance metrics are exceptional. 97% arrest rate. 0 empathy deviation scores. The psychological board has cleared you for advanced assignment. Thank you, Director. Cale kept his voice flat, professional. Inside, that stone in his chest grew heavier. You've been selected for the Memory Technician Oversight Program. Starting next month, you'll supervise the contrition centers, ensure the emotional scrubbing procedures are being implemented correctly. She slid a tablet across the desk. This is a significant promotion. Most officers don't qualify until their 30s. Cale looked at the tablet. On screen, a rotating 3D model showed the neural implant they'd install in his brain, an upgrade from the standard compliance chip, designed to monitor not just his own emotional state, but those of everyone around him. He'd become a walking sensor array, detecting illegal feeling like a Geiger counter detecting radiation. He'd also become complicit in erasing what little humanity remained in the criminals he processed. I'm honored, he said, because that's what was expected. Director Salvo studied him with eyes like ice. You understand the responsibility. The memory technicians handle our most important work. Without them, we couldn't rehabilitate offenders. We'd have to resort to cruder methods. Execution, she meant. Before the Reformation, before the ministry learned to scrub minds clean, they'd simply killed anyone who threatened social order with their dangerous emotions. The transition to memory modification had been hailed as progress, mercy, civilization at its finest. Cale had read the pre-Reformation histories in the restricted archives. He'd seen the casualty numbers, the chaos of the Pride Wars when unchecked emotion tore society apart. He understood why the ministry existed, why these measures were necessary. Understanding didn't make the stone in his chest any lighter. I understand completely, Director. Good. She stood, dismissing him. You start orientation Monday. Don't disappoint me, Officer Thrace. You have a bright future ahead of you. Cale left her office and walked through those silent corridors, past the biometric scanners and the surveillance cameras and the 3,000 functionaries who traded their humanity for safety. He took the elevator down to the ground floor, signed out at the security desk, and stepped into the gray afternoon. The air outside tasted like metal and rain. He walked without destination, letting his feet carry him through Sector 4's identical streets. All around him, citizens moved with that peculiar ministry gait, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, facial expressions calibrated to convey neither happiness nor distress. They'd been trained since childhood to be invisible, forgettable, safe. This is what we saved, Cale thought, watching a woman hurry past with her groceries, her face blank as paper. This is what civilization looks like when we cut out everything dangerous. He found himself in front of the old cathedral. It stood in the center of Remembrance Square, one of the few pre-Reformation buildings the ministry had preserved, not out of respect, but as a warning. The cathedral's stained glass windows had been replaced with frosted panels. Its bells had been silenced. The statues of saints that once lined its facade had been removed, leaving only empty niches that looked like missing teeth. A plaque beside the entrance read, "Here once stood a monument to pride and superstition. See how far we've come." Cale climbed the cathedral steps and pushed open the heavy wooden door. Inside, the vast space echoed with emptiness. The pews had been removed, replaced by ministry information kiosks displaying propaganda about the dangers of unregulated emotion. Where the altar had stood, massive screen showed a looping video, before and after footage of offenders undergoing memory modification, their faces transforming from anguished to serene. But high above, in the cathedral's vaulted ceiling, something had survived. Cale tilted his head back and looked up at the frescoes. Faded, water-damaged, half obscured by decades of grime, but still there. Angels and demons, saints and sinners, all painted with faces that expressed everything the ministry had outlawed. Joy and rage, ecstasy and despair, love and hatred rendered in colors that had once been brilliant. Someone had tried to feel everything once, had climbed these walls with brushes and paint, and the absolute conviction that emotion mattered enough to preserve in pigment, that it was holy. Cale stood there for a long time, staring up at those forbidden faces, feeling that stone in his chest crack just slightly. Beautiful, isn't it? He spun around. A woman stood behind him, late 20s, ministry uniform, her dark hair cut regulation short. But her eyes were wrong, too bright, too alive. I'm sorry. Cale's hand moved instinctively toward the neural disruptor on his belt. She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd seen in months. The frescoes, they're beautiful. The ministry keeps saying they'll paint over them, but I think even they can't quite bring themselves to do it. Like destroying them would be admitting we lost something important. Officer. Cale searched for her identification badge. Valencia. You shouldn't speak that way. If someone reported you, you're going to report me. She tilted her head, studying him with those two bright eyes. Senior Compliance Officer Cale Thrace, youngest promotion in ministry history. Arrest record approaching perfect. But you come here every week, don't you? Stand in this empty church and stare at paintings of things you're supposed to believe never mattered. His heart hammered against his ribs. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. She moved closer, and he caught her scent something floral, organic, completely inappropriate for a ministry officer. I've been watching you, Cale. You walk these streets like a ghost. You do everything right, follow every protocol, and you're dying inside. I can see it. This conversation is over. He turned to leave. Her name was Alara. Cale froze. The girl from the academy, Valencia continued softly. The memory technician you loved. I accessed your file. You kissed her once, and 3 days later she collapsed. Spontaneous arrhythmia, the doctor said. But you knew better, didn't you? You felt something pass between you, something that shouldn't have been possible. He turned back slowly. How do you know about that? Those files are sealed. I'm a memory technician too. We have access to everything. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint scar along her temple, the mark of someone who'd had their compliance chip upgraded. I've been scrubbing minds for 3 years, Cale. Do you know what that's like? Diving into someone's memories, finding the things that make them human, and burning them away. The love affairs, the passionate friendships, the moments of pride and joy, and all the dangerous things that make life worth living. It's necessary, he said, but his voice sounded hollow. Is it? Valencia's eyes searched his face. Or have we convinced ourselves it's necessary because the alternative is admitting we destroyed something precious, that we amputated our souls to avoid the risk of feeling too much? The Pride Wars were 70 years ago. And yes, people died. Emotion ran unchecked, and civilization nearly collapsed. But Cale, her hand found his arm, and even through the fabric of his uniform, her touch burned. We didn't just restrain emotion. We killed it. We turned ourselves into ghosts. And for what? Look around you. Is this really what we wanted to save? Cale pulled away from her touch. You're going to get yourself arrested. You're going to end up in a contrition center. And someone like me is going to scrub your mind clean, and you'll forget you ever felt this way. I know, she smiled sadly. I think about it constantly, but I'd rather burn bright and be erased than spend another 40 years as a ghost. She pressed something into his hand, a card with an address. There are others like us, people who remember. We meet in the places the cameras don't quite reach, and we try to feel something real before they catch us. Come find us when you're ready to stop being dead. She walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty cathedral, leaving Cale alone with the card and the frescoes, and that crack spreading wider in the stone lodged in his chest. He should have reported her immediately, should have tracked her to wherever this underground resistance was hiding, and brought the full weight of the ministry down on all of them. Instead, he went home to his assigned housing unit, sat on his regulation furniture, and stared at the card until dawn. Part II. The underground, the address led him to an abandoned textile factory in Sector 9, in the industrial quarter where the ministry's surveillance was thin and intermittent. Cale waited until after midnight, when the patrol schedules created a 17-minute blind spot, then slipped through the rusted gate and climbed the exterior stairs. The 5th floor glowed with candlelight. He found them in what had once been the factory's main production floor, 30 or 40 people sitting in clusters, talking in hushed voices, sharing food and drink like they were at some pre-Reformation gathering. But it was their faces that stopped Cale in the doorway. They were alive, laughing, arguing, crying, expressing every emotion the ministry had spent decades trying to eliminate. Valencia spotted him and crossed the room. "You came. I wasn't sure you would. I shouldn't be here." But he didn't leave. No one should be here, that's the point. She took his hand, another violation, casual physical contact, without purpose or permission, and led him into the crowd. "Everyone, this is Cale. He's one of us, even if he doesn't know it yet." They welcomed him like he belonged there, offered him wine, real wine, not the synthetic substitute the ministry distributed, and food that actually tasted like something. A man with gray-streaked hair recited poetry from memory, verses that spoke of longing and loss. A young couple sat in the corner, holding hands, just holding hands, like that simple connection mattered more than safety. Cale felt like he'd stumbled into another world. "Most of us work for the ministry," Valencia explained, sitting beside him on a salvaged couch. "Compliance officers, technicians, administrators. We know the system too well. We've seen what it does to people." She gestured to a woman across the room. "That's Dr. Lynn. She designs the neural implants. Every day she makes the tools that turn humans into ghosts, and every night she comes here to remember what it felt like to be real." "This is insane," Cale said. "If they find you, they will eventually." Valencia's voice was calm, accepting. "The ministry always finds us. They'll drag us to the contrition centers, scrub our minds, turn us into proper citizens. Or maybe they'll just execute us as an example. Either way, we know how this ends. Then why?" She looked at him with those two bright eyes. "Because 40 more years of gray is worse than death. Because someone has to remember that we were human once. Because," she touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Because some things are worth dying for." Cale should have left, should have called for backup and brought the ministry down on all of them. But instead, he stayed. He stayed and talked to Dr. Lynn about the neural implants she designed, the guilt that ate at her every time she heard of another successful scrubbing. He stayed and listened to the poet recite verses about desire and rebellion. He stayed and watched the young couple hold hands like they were holding the whole world. And when Valencia led him to a quieter corner, away from the others, he didn't resist. "Tell me about Alara," she said. So he did. He told her about the academy, about finding someone who saw the world the way he did, about stealing kisses in the library's blind spots and feeling like they were the only two real people in a city of ghosts, about that last kiss when something passed between them, cold and hungry and wrong, and 3 days later she was dead. "I killed her," he whispered. "I don't know how, but I did. Something about me took something from her, or gave her something she couldn't survive." Valencia's hand found his. There are stories in the restricted archives, pre-Reformation accounts of people with abilities the ministry would call impossible. Empaths who could feel others' emotions, sensitives who could sense emotional energy, and very rarely people who could transfer feelings through touch. That's not real. The ministry proved. The ministry proved what they wanted to prove. That emotion is chemical, controllable, eliminable. But what if they were wrong? What if feeling is more than just neurotransmitters and synaptic patterns? What if it's something fundamental and you're someone who can manipulate it? Cale pulled his hand away. "You're saying I'm what? Some kind of emotional vampire?" "I'm saying you might be able to do something the ministry has spent decades trying to prevent. You might be able to make people feel so intensely that their bodies can't handle it, that they burn too bright and burn out. That's murder, is it?" Valencia leaned closer. "Or is it mercy? Think about it, Cale. Everyone you touch would feel everything they've been denied their whole lives. Every joy, every sorrow, every passionate moment the ministry stole from them. They'd die, yes, but they'd die whole. They'd die human. You're insane. Maybe." She smiled that sad smile again. "But I'd volunteer. Right now, if you'd let me. I'd rather have one moment of real feeling, even if it kills me, than another decade of this half-life." Cale stood abruptly. "I need to leave." He walked away from her, away from the underground gathering, away from the dangerous ideas taking root in his mind. He climbed down the factory stairs and out into the gray night, where the city stretched before him in its million careful compliances. But he carried the address with him. And 3 nights later, he went back. Part III. The first time her name was Iris. She found him at one of the underground gatherings 2 months after his first visit. Then, Cale had become a regular presence in the factory's 5th floor, drawn back night after night by the desperate need to be around people who still felt something real. He'd started bringing his notebook, the leather-bound one he'd hidden since the academy, and sketching the faces around him. Iris watched him draw for an hour before speaking. "You're him," she said, "the one Valencia talks about, the one who killed his girlfriend with a kiss." Cale's pencil stopped moving. "I didn't. It wasn't. I know. Accident, impossible. But it happened anyway." She sat beside him, and he saw she was older than the others, maybe 40, with gray threading through her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of years spent smiling before the ministry taught her not to. "I want you to do it to me." "Absolutely not. Please." Her voice cracked. "I've been dead for 15 years. They caught me with my daughter. We were laughing, Cale. Just laughing at something stupid, and a neighbor reported us for excessive joy. They took Sarah, scrubbed her mind, and I haven't seen her since. She doesn't even remember I exist. I'm sorry, but they installed a deep compliance chip after that. I can barely feel anything anymore. Can't cry, can't laugh, can barely remember what Sarah's face looked like when she was happy. But Valencia says you can give it back. Just for a moment, you can make me feel everything I've lost. Tears ran down her face, a violation in itself, evidence of emotional dysfunction. Please, I don't want to die empty. Cale looked at her, this broken woman who'd lost everything to the ministry's mercy, and felt that crack in his chest split wider. I don't know if I can control it. What if it doesn't work? What if you just die? Then I die. She took his hand, holding it between both of hers. But at least I'll die trying to be human again. They went to one of the factory's abandoned offices, away from the others. Valencia came with them, insisted on it, said someone needed to witness whatever happened next. The room was small, dusty, lit by a single candle that cast shadows on the broken walls. Iris sat on an old desk, her legs dangling, looking suddenly young despite the gray in her hair. How do we do this? Cale asked. I think you just touch her, kiss her maybe, like you did with Alara. Valencia stood in the corner, her face half shadowed. But this time, don't fight it. Whatever you felt passing between you, let it happen. And if she dies, she's already dead, Iris said quietly. Have been for 15 years. You'd just be making it official. Cale moved to stand in front of her. Up close, he could see the compliance chip's scar behind her ear, the places where they'd burned the feeling out of her brain. He thought about Alara, about that cold hunger that had risen in him when they kissed, the way it had reached for her like drowning reaches for air. I'm afraid, he admitted. Me too. Iris smiled, a broken, terrible, beautiful smile. But I'm more afraid of spending another day like this. So please, Cale, please let me feel something real before I go. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. For a moment, nothing happened. Just lips touching lips, warm and human and ordinary. Cale started to pull away, embarrassed and relieved. Then the cold came. It rose from somewhere deep inside him, that same hungry emptiness he'd felt with Alara. But this time, he didn't fight it. He let it flow through him and into Iris, let it reach for all the places where the ministry had carved her hollow. And something answered. Iris gasped against his mouth, her hands clutching his shoulders. He felt her heart stutter, felt something fundamental shift in the space between them. But more than that, he felt what she felt, a rush of sensation so intense it was almost painful. Memories flooding back. Sarah's laugh, the weight of her daughter in her arms, the taste of strawberries, the smell of rain, every beautiful moment the compliance chip had tried to erase. Iris was crying and laughing at the same time, tears streaming down her face as 15 years of stolen feeling came roaring back in a single overwhelming wave. Her heartbeat hammered against his chest, fast, too fast, unsustainable. Sarah, she whispered. Oh God, I remember everything. Then her heart stopped. Cale caught her as she collapsed, held her as the life left her body. But her face wore an expression of such pure, transcendent joy that he couldn't look away. She died smiling. She died whole. Oh God, Cale whispered. Oh God, what did I do? Valencia knelt beside them, taking Iris's pulse even though they all knew she was gone. You gave her what she asked for. You let her feel. I killed her. You freed her. Valencia looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears and something else, something hungry. and you can do it again. Part IV. The word spreads they came to him after that, one by one, through the long gray months that followed. The underground network spread word of what Cale could do, not as a warning, but as hope. People who'd spent decades emptied by compliance chips and memory scrubbing, and the ministry's systematic destruction of anything resembling passion. People who were so tired of being dead that they'd risk actual death for one moment of feeling real. Cale tried to refuse them at first, tried to explain that he didn't understand what he was, that he couldn't control it, that they'd die. But they always smiled that same knowing smile and said, "I know. That's why I'm asking." The second was a man named Thomas, who'd been caught writing love letters to another man and spent 5 years in a contrition center, having the deviance burned out of him. He died remembering what it felt like to love someone without shame. The third was a woman named Chen, an artist who'd had her creativity scrubbed away after painting something the ministry deemed too individualistic. She died with paint-stained fingers and a smile on her face. The fourth was a former memory technician named Marcus, who couldn't live with the guilt of what he'd done to others. He died begging forgiveness. Cale kept count, sketched their faces in his notebook, recording their last moments, carrying them like stones, just as he'd later tell Marin. Each one died transcendent, joyful, finally at peace. Each one asked him to remember them, and each one made it harder to pretend he was still a ministry officer. He went through the motions at work, filed his reports, prepared for his promotion to the memory technician oversight program. Director Salvo praised his performance metrics, talked about his bright future. But at night, he'd go to the factory, to the underground gatherings, where people who remembered what it meant to be human would offer themselves to him like supplicants at an altar. "You need to stop," Valencia said one night, after he'd given the kiss to a woman named Anna, who'd wanted to remember what her husband's face looked like before they scrubbed him. "The ministry's going to notice eventually. People are dying, Cale. They'll trace it back to you. Let them." He was sketching Anna's face, capturing the joy she'd worn at the end. "What are they going to charge me with? Helping people feel murder, sedition, emotional terrorism." Valencia sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. "They'll scrub your mind so clean you won't remember your own name, let alone all these faces you're trying to preserve. Then I'll draw faster." He added shadows beneath Anna's eyes, depth to her smile. "Someone has to remember them. Someone has to bear witness that they chose this, that they died human. And what about you?" Valencia's voice softened. "What are you choosing? A ministry officer playing executioner in the dark? Or something else?" Cale set down his pencil. "I don't know what I am anymore." "I do." She touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, just as she had that first night. "You're the Severance, the space between life and death where people can finally be whole. You're what happens when the ministry's perfect order meets someone who refuses to forget what feeling costs. That's not a person, that's a weapon. Maybe." She leaned closer, her breath warm on his lips. "Or maybe you're something the universe made to balance the scales. All these years, the ministry's been killing people slowly, draining them empty until they're ghosts. Maybe you're the answer. Fast and fierce and letting people burn bright before the end. You're romanticizing murder. I'm recognizing revolution. Her lips were inches from his now. In a world that demands numbness, every kiss is an act of war. Every moment of true feeling is a bomb going off in the ministry's careful order. You're not killing them, Kale. You're teaching them how to die free. You're insane. So kiss me and prove it. He pulled away. Valencia, I've been scrubbing minds for 4 years. Do you know what that does to you? Seeing people's most beautiful memories and burning them away. I've erased first loves and wedding days and the births of children. I've taken everything that makes people human and turned it to ash. And I did it because I told myself it was necessary. Her voice broke. I can't do it anymore, Kale. I can't be this person. So either kiss me and let me die feeling something real, or I swear to God I'll report you myself and let the ministry turn you into what I've become. You don't mean that. Try me. They stared at each other in the candlelight, two people who'd given everything to the ministry and had nothing left to show for it but guilt and gray and the desperate hunger to feel something, anything, before the end. I'll remember you, Kale whispered. Is that enough? If you do this, if you ask me to do this, I'll carry you with all the others. You'll be one more stone I drag through whatever life I have left. That's all I want. She smiled through tears. To be remembered, to matter, even if only to you. To die as myself instead of as another ministry ghost. So he kissed her. And Valencia died the way all the others had, transcendent, joyful, whole. She died remembering everything the ministry had made her do and forgiving herself for all of it. She died loving him, though he hadn't realized it until he felt the emotion pour out of her in those final moments. She died whispering, "Remember me. Please remember me." He held her until dawn, sketching her face by the dying candlelight, adding her to the collection of beautiful, terrible stones he carried. When the ministry officers came, because of course they came, Valencia must have tipped them off before meeting him. Kale didn't run. He let them find him with her body, with his notebook full of faces, with the evidence of everything he'd become. Director Salvo came personally to oversee his arrest. "Officer Thrace," she said, looking at him like he was something that had crawled out from under a rock. 12 deaths linked directly to you. Conspiracy with known emotional criminals. Violation of compliance protocols. You were going to be our next memory technician. You were the ministry's future. I know, Kale said quietly. That's why I had to stop. They took him to a contrition center, not for processing, but for study. Dr. Lynn herself oversaw his neural scans, trying to understand what made him different, what allowed him to weaponize emotion the way he did. She worked in silence, her face carefully blank, and Kale wondered if she remembered him from the underground gatherings, or if they'd already scrubbed that away. The scans showed nothing conclusive. He was neurologically normal, his compliance chip functioning properly. Whatever made him capable of the kiss existed somewhere the ministry's instruments couldn't measure. Recommend immediate memory modification, Dr. Lynn said, her voice flat. Subject shows no remorse. High probability of recidivism. But Director Salvo had other ideas. No, she said. studying Cale through the observation window like he was a particularly interesting specimen. I want him monitored, released back into circulation with enhanced surveillance. If these criminals think they can find him, let them come. We'll use him to root out the entire underground network. Director, that's an order, Doctor. Officer Thrace will be fitted with a tracking implant and released. And when these emotional deviants come looking for their severance, she smiled coldly, we'll be waiting. So they let him go. They installed a tracker behind his left ear, assigned him to a menial ministry position where he could be watched constantly, and waited for the underground to contact him. Cale went through the motions, filed his reports, and at night sketched the faces he carried in a new notebook they didn't know about. But the underground was smarter than the ministry expected. They'd gone quiet after Valentia's death, melted back into the gray masses, waiting for their moment. Cale waited too. He waited and watched, and felt that hollowness in his chest grow wider with each passing day. The ministry thought they could use him as bait, thought they could control what he'd become. They were wrong. 6 months later, a woman approached him in an underground cafe. She was young, severe, beautiful, a ministry officer, obviously, her hand resting on her sidearm, her eyes tracking his every movement with hunter's focus. But beneath that professional exterior, he recognized something else. That same terrible hunger he'd seen in all the others. The hunger to feel something real before the end. Cale smiled and went back to his drawing, adding shadows beneath the eyes, depth to the expression of his latest memory. Let her come, he thought. Let her be the one who finally understands. Because even the ministry's most loyal servants harbored small rebellions in their hearts. Even they remembered, sometimes, what it felt like to be human. Her name would be Marin Volt, and she would be his last, his greatest, his most perfect mercy. The severance was ready.